Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Welcome, Bruce.
Hey, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's the weather's getting better out there. Just looking out my bedroom window, and
Getting better for a
and
while,
and
finally.
it's really done wonders for my own spirits. And we're engaged in a lot of mainly my wife, cleaning up, various rats' nests around the house, like,
Hmm.
think cupboards that hadn't been organized, bookshelves that haven't been organized. So we're doing that kind of thing. I think a lot of people are. You're in your house so much,
Yeah.
uh, lots of time for doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah, if you feel the inclination, it's very demotivating, all of this stuff too. Found a lot of people saying, well, I've been home, but. So anyway, this is a morning podcast. You can tell this is not a dark beer I'm drinking. This is my
Cheers.
morning Joe, and the morning light streaming in the window, and it's a beautiful looking world out there. What I can see of it from here.
So buy coffee beans, Bruce. That's all I'm saying. If you like your morning Joe, buy some coffee beans.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to be talking hockey, not the lockdown or pandemic. We're going to be talking hockey. So
Sounds like a plan.
let's escape to the world of hockey for a little bit here, and we're going to talk about the possibility of Sam Gagner returning to the Oilers. We're going to talk about the Oilers PK and some of these. It's really hard to analyze what goes on in a PK, and we'll get into that. But I'm starting to dig through the numbers, and I think there's a couple really there's one actually really interesting stat about the power play and the PK that we're going to get into. And whereas the I think the strategies of the power play are more obvious, at least now to me that I've studied it. But it's still a bit of a mystery on the PK, and I'm digging into that. We're also
Oh.
going to talk about the draft.
Hmm.
The trial balloon that was floated this week to have the draft in June, which was quickly shot down because it was such a ridiculous idea, and I think you killed it, Bruce, with your post on that. Like as soon as they read that post, they just thought we're done. So we're going to talk about all those things. Let's start with Sam Gagner. Bruce, why, why do you? Is there any indication or any indicators that Sam Gagner would be wanted again as a player next year? Where's that coming from?
Well, it came from uh, a post that who the heck wrote it now? It's been a couple
Spec.
days since I. Spectre, yeah, Mark Spectre has got a new a new column about weekly mailbag, Ask Spec or something. Anyway, he suggested that Gagne might be in the plans of Ken Holland as a front office um, future front office person, and he named no fewer than three sort of veteran players with Detroit: Dan Cleary, Kirk Maltby, who was the third one. Anyway, guys, longtime Red Wings who wound up working in the front office of that team. And he said, it's kind of Holland's MO. Well, of course, he's got lots of players to choose from. But Sam Gagner fits the bill on a number of fronts in that, he's an older player that's nearing sort of making the decision on the next phase of his career. A very, very smart guy with, a level head about him. I can see him in a role of that nature. So let's take a spec at face value on that point. I looked at it more from a hockey perspective, and it's a funny thing, Sam Gagner was traded out of Edmonton in 2014 as a salary cap situation where they moved his salary, took on another one. They brought him back in 2019 in a salary cap exchange where they got rid of one bad contract, Brian Spooner, bringing Gagner back. They moved him out in 2020 as a salary cap exchange because they had to make room for Andreas and Athanasiou. Got to keep working on that one. And in each case, kind of dollar for dollar was the trade. Uh, but last year, I mean, as a $3 million player, Sam was an overpay. But that contract will be done at the end of this year. And if he wants to come back to the NHL and play hockey again, he's going to take another major haircut. And I would suggest, as expected, that'll be a 1 year deal under $1 million. And at that price, That's not the worst player that you can get. It's a guy that knows Edmonton, that's played here obviously twice in the past. Uh, he has pretty decent results. Like this year, he had 12 points in 36 games. And you got to realize none of that was on the first unit power play. Very little time did he spend in the top six of the order. He moved around. He played all three forward positions, and uh, his on ice results were actually very good. In fact, he was the top guy on the Oilers in such categories as, shot categories, uh, shot for percentage, shot attempt percentage, and he actually really killed it against middle and lower level competition. And he got killed against upper level competition, suggesting that yes, he's best placed in the bottom six playing against other bottom sixes, but in that role, he can perform well. And if if he's looking around and says, I want to play one last year, one last kick of the can in the NHL, and I'm willing to take that haircut in order to keep paying, I've already made over $30 million in my career. If there's a fit in Edmonton where his wife, as I understand it, is a practicing medical doctor, and there's three kids, and the Oilers throw their hat in the ring, that would be a very good fit from his perspective, and I think he's not a bad fit from their perspective. So I see him as being a pretty reasonable, depth option. But if you pay him as a depth player, I think you could get still value from that player.
I would not bring him back personally as a
Hmm.
player. Um, Based on our own evaluation of him
Yeah.
with his grade A scoring chance numbers, they're not. They're just really mediocre. They're just okay. So um, he was he was okay on the attack, not so good on defense. Uh, he's what is he 30?
Yeah.
It's a game that's speeding up. He's not that fast. I,
Right.
I think they could. So, and here's who they have on the wing, Bruce.
Hmm.
Uh, Nuge, Yamamoto, Cassian, Nygaard, Chason, Neal, Archibald, Ennis, Athanasio, Benson. They're getting pretty full there, and I don't. So I no, listen. I didn't think Sam Gagner was a bad player this year. I thought he was okay, but based on I would if like I see the choice coming. Like if you're going to bring in a veteran winger, I like Tyler Ennis a lot more
It's,
than I liked Sam Gagner, and I think I'll be surprised if he comes back this year, and maybe it's time for him to go into management.
mhm.
Because if that's the path, maybe it's time to make, or he can go play in Europe if that's open to him if he wants to keep playing. But I think the team has moved on, and if teams need to change, they need to keep getting, and this Oilers team needs to get faster. I still think that. And Ennis, the players they brought in, Ennis, Athanasio, it's trying to give Tyler Benson more looks in the NHL. I would rather those minutes next year go to Tyler Benson, who's in the third year of his ELC, than to Sam Gagner. So whereas I he's an old Oiler, and I understand the attachment to the player. He's not someone that I would personally target for a contract next year. The interesting thing about the one interesting thing finally is the idea that you'll sign him for a million, less than a million.
Hmm.
I'm going to suggest with the way the economy is going for the NHL, the minimum salary is going to be well less than a million. If Bruce, if they can't play before fans next year
Hmm.
or half next year, man, this league in terms of its revenues is like it is going to be like the minimum salary. What's it going to be? 300,000, two hundred
You
and
know,
fifty thousand. Like we
if
could
you're
have,
talking about real dollars, I
yeah,
mean, the CBA says that the minimum is $700,000, and it says that uh, that's what I call Bettman bucks, which are then clawed back by escrow, and that's where the
yeah,
haircut's going to take place. So you can
yeah. I'm
sign a
talking
guy
about
for
real dollars.
$700,000 Bettman bucks, and he may get 400,000 real dollars or something, or significantly less. They're talking about escrow of they're talking in the range of 33% as and obviously some of that will how deep of a cut that is will depend on. Uh, how whether or not they're able to pick up this season, and also, next year's revenues. There's every chance that the league as a whole is going to have, there's going to be games played without fans as part of the league at minimum next year. That's going to take a toll. So the escrow situation, that's going to become a very dirty word. It already is among the players, but ultimately, the deal with the league is half the hockey-related revenues go to the players, and the league keeps the other half. And how how it gets split up among the players is I mean, some of it's just pure math, right?
I think the NHL is in a good position to maintain labor peace as far as this goes because they have it's a very simple formula. Whatever the league makes, the players get half and the owners get half.
Yeah,
So if everyone's heads around that, it doesn't. So if the pie's what is it, 6 billion now or 5 billion now, and in this year, well, maybe next year it's 2 billion, and they just divide it up 50-50. So you're right. The CBA says one thing and it'll be clawed back on escrow. And I think the maximum escrow anticipated was 20%, if I'm not mistaken. But that might have to be negotiated because of the new economic reality, the new normal for the NHL. Anyway, so any thoughts on any rebuttal to what I said on Gagne?
well, I have to say you're the first person I've heard say it's time to move on, and this is from a very limited example of people I got feedback from, which is a list of people who cared deeply enough to bother saying. So some of it was in the comments section of the post, some of it was on Twitter. I got a DM, I even got an email from someone. Every one of them loved Sam and said, geez, I hope they can bring him back for one last kick at the can. And I know his fans, and he's got a lot of fans in this town. His fans were pretty disappointed that he got traded at the deadline, the one year that it looked like he was finally going to play a playoff game for Edmonton, and off he goes. And in a deal, it was a hard-headed business move by uh, by Holland in the sense that he had to match the salary, and he thought that Athanasiou would be a better player. I'm not sure how much better he was, frankly, than Gagne in the little time we saw him.
He
And
wasn't any better.
I do absolutely agree with you that it's if there's a choice for 30-year-old scoring winger veteran uh, component on the team, if they only want one of those guys, it comes down to Ennis versus Gagne, and Ennis maybe has a leg up, and he also has he has a history in this town too, where he'd be happy, I think, to sign here and stick around. I'm not sure that they wouldn't have room for two of them, but
Well, let's just quickly go through the lines.
yeah,
Looking at the wings. So on the top line, let's say you have Nugent Hopkins and Yamamoto with Draisaitl, and let's say you have Cassian and Ennis on the top line with McDavid. So then on the third line, your candidate, third, fourth line, then your candidates are Nygaard, Chason, who's under contract, Neal, who's under contract, Kara, who's under contract, Archibald, who's under contract, Athanasiou, who's under contract, and Benson, who is under contract. That's a lot of names, right? I just named a lot of wingers
I
there.
did.
So that's why I'm saying this. Listen. I love the idea. I think
Yeah,
everyone loves the idea of Sam Gagner coming back.
I
But when
hear
we
you.
actually look at already the contracts on the books, I don't see how it's even possible because he's not a center anymore, and they're loaded on the wing. So there you go.
Well, one way is if in fact there's compliance buyouts and James Neal is gone.
Yes.
That changes the equation. I think there's a significant possibility that that's how things work out. So
Yes. So then who would you rather have back, Neal or Gagne? Like, let's say I guess if they bought out Neal, they couldn't bring him back, right? That's how compliance
right.
buyouts work. So he'd be gone.
Hmm.
Even then, I just, I just think Athanasiou and all these other players are going to get their shot. And anyway, so I hate to be the outlier on this, especially on a player that we all like and I
Right.
like to say that, but
Well,
that's just my
I
assessment.
would say he's a person that we all like for sure.
Yes.
There are aspects of his
Yeah.
game that we've found wanting over the years, but he's a very easy person to root for.
I sure
And
like the, yeah.
was fun to have him come back and play a year in Edmonton for sure. And it was kind of sad that he was sort of the I can't say victim, but of the cap maneuver at the deadline, that he was the one that got moved out. But in the end, who knows, right? Even if we're going to have playoffs, but it was. I'll just say I wish him well, and it was a tough situation to get traded out of Edmonton away from his family and to the worst team in the league and finish out the season there is a tough row to hoe. But you know what? Lots of NHLers have to deal with that reality.
Indeed. Yeah, and again, I really like this second little stint with him on the Oilers. I liked him better as a player in many ways than I did in the first time around. I thought he just hustled so hard and had so much grit this time. He was just going for it in a way that there was a level of commitment to playing hockey the right way that wasn't there necessarily the first time because he was young and just learning the game still. And he would have helped the Oilers in the playoffs, I think. And I bet you they didn't want to get rid of him because I think he if they had, if he had stayed with the team and if there were playoffs, he's the kind of guy you could have plugged into a game, might have scored a big goal.
Yeah, well, the big difference from his first time here in the second was that he was no longer playing center, and that's where his defensive deficiencies were really exposed.
Yeah. Let's move along and talk about the Oilers' PK. And first of all, Bruce, last podcast we had a fairly lengthy discussion about how's the best way to rate a PK, and I was won over almost instantly by the arguments you made that the best way is to look at net, which is the power play goals scored against your penalty kill minus the shorthanded goals you score for. And when you rate, so I went back and I rated the PKs on that standard. Let me just find and it really made a pretty major difference in how the PKs were rated with those great 1980 PKs led by Wayne Gretzky and Yari Curry, kind of shooting the top for franchise history when you go by net PK percentage. So there was three, if you go by that, in their years, the 83, 84, 88, 89, and 85, 86 PKs were all the best PKs in the NHL. And in 86, 87, 89, 90, they were the second best in the NHL both those years. So the Oilers had the best penalty killing net PK, and I'm in the future going in the 1980s, and it's not probably that close. Like that was a unit that terrorized opposing power plays because of their ability to score goals. When you get past those 1980s groups, the next best one, and this is not a surprise at all, the next best net PK is the 2005-06 Pronger Jason Smith unit, and ranked fourth in the NHL. So when we look at this current unit, 29-20, they were it looks like about the 10th best PK in Oilers history, and the 29-20 unit, and they were fifth overall in the NHL this year.
Pretty good.
So that's very good, and it's again this huge improvement over last year, where they were 29th out of 31 net PK, and the second worst PK in Oilers franchise history in that regard. So they just had this miraculous, almost seemingly miraculous. It wasn't a miracle because it actually was just hockey, but this incredible rebound turnaround on the PK. So thanks, Bruce, for pointing that out. I think that was a good use of hockey stats.
Yeah, well, for keeping the puck out of their net, and by straight percentage, they went from 30th to second, so from second worst to second best. But because there was very little danger of them scoring shorthanded, that knocks them down a couple pegs. Like I think they had 3 shorthanded goals all year, all involving Archibald and Sheahan. Whereas even last year, Draisaitl, I think he had 2 or 3 shorthanded goals on his own. I remember a couple of end-to-end rushes that he produced, pretty spectacular shorties. And of course, there's no comparison. There's no comparison between any other team and the Oilers of the 80s for doing that. So the net goals, I am convinced that's the right way to do it. But much as I used to pump that in the 80s, nowadays you have to say, well, you have to be consistent and use the same thing, even if it knocks your team down a couple pegs. Top 5 in the league is pretty darn good. And they did that by giving up nothing. 31 power play goals against compared to 62 last year, like half the number of goals and like 85 or 87% the number of games. And it was, uh, I think, obviously you're going to look at the coaching as being a significant part of that. But I just was, what did you see as a change in their methodology that resulted in the better defensive record?
I think there really has been a fundamental shift in attitude that Tippett has brought in, and where I think that, and I might be wrong about this, but I think that Todd McClellan, and I remember him talking about this. Todd McClellan was a shot volume coach, so his PK and Hitchcock's PK, I'm going to just talk about them as one.
Mm-hmm.
They tended to give up. They were worried about shots. They didn't want shots. They wanted to cut down on shots. So what we see this year, though, is the Oilers allowed more shots on a rate basis on the PK this year. The shots went up, but
Mm-hmm.
what went down was high danger shots. The rate of high danger shots went down this year,
Mm-hmm.
and we see the same thing on the power play. So on the power play, under McClellan's power play, there was more shots, but there was fewer high danger shots on a rate basis. Tippett's power play, there is less shots, but more high danger shots. So on both special teams, we see this focus on shot quality as opposed to shot volume. Tippett is all about the high danger areas of the ice and limiting shots from those high danger areas. And he seems to be willing to give up shots on the PK from outside if you're going to cover off that middle area. And he seems to be not that interested in taking as many shots from the outside on the power play in order to set up those shots from the high danger areas. And these aren't massive statistical differences. I think they're significant, but they're not massive. But I think it's a change of philosophy, and with maybe it doesn't work with all groups of hockey players, but I think certainly with this power play unit, which has such a high amount of skill, it worked. And with this PK unit, I think it had an impact on the thinking of some of the key players on the PK, like Chris Russell, maybe to change their style of play a little bit more and not worry so much about going out there to block every shot, but to think about maybe stopping the high danger shots, stopping those passes through the diagonal, like the diagonal passes and the cross seam passes through. And we talked about a little bit about Russell's shot blocking numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So, before we get into that, why don't you just, any thoughts on what I've said so far?
No, I mean the data seems clear enough that the exact same trend on both power play and penalty kill, in reverse directions. There on the power play, shots for went down, high danger shots went up. On the penalty kill, shots against went up, high danger chances went down, and both teams produced better results, obviously, in terms of goals. That maybe the focus on high danger chances as opposed to shot volume is something that's paid off.
So one of the things it's really hard to analyze power play penalty kills because the individual numbers are hard to come by. Like we try to watch the plays and figure out, okay, who made the mistake on the PK. There's no situation in hockey harder to ascertain who made the mistake, because is it the guy who was too aggressive going for the puck, or was it the player when that guy was too aggressive who didn't make the read and then go to where he was supposed to go? Like they all work as a unit. And the breakdowns are very subtle, and we don't know the strategy necessarily that they're trying to employ. When are they supposed to be aggressive? When are they not supposed to be aggressive? What are they trying to do? It's hard for us to judge. It's the hardest place of all by far to judge who made the mistake and how big that mistake was.
Yeah, well, but by definition on the penalty kill, because you're short, at a man disadvantage. It's not the obvious man-on-man situation. They're always playing zone defense. And so it's a little harder to say, well, that guy got beat, because that guy is, he's governing a zone as opposed to going a one-on-one battle against a particular player. And so, whereas the power play, of course, the reverse situation is true, but because you have the puck, you're judging the guys who are making plays on the puck or, screening the goalie. It's a little more clear cut, and we've always found it's a little more straightforward. I was going to say straighter forward to to evaluate offensive contributions to scoring chances than it is defensive, and that
Oh
goes
yeah.
across the board. But penalty kill especially, it's sometimes it's a real judgment call, and there's a lot of where we recorded it's a 1 or a 0, right? But it's a lot of sort of 0.6, 0.4. You kind of, yeah, which way are you leaning, and it's
This is why
it's
I hardly ever write about this data, because I don't
right.
really have a lot of faith in our own data. Like, we're doing our best, but
Hmm.
like, here's a couple examples. The puck's moving around the umbrella that, and, the opposition's moving it around, and it goes out to the shooter on the half wall. Let's call him Ovechkin. Now, is it Russell's fault if he doesn't, if that shot gets through? Is that his fault, or was he supposed to maybe collapse in and help out in front of the net? What's his job there? Or the puck goes down low to the player right beside the net, passed down low to the player, and there's a defenseman who's kind of covering both the player with the
Right.
puck and the player down low, kind of in between them. Well, if that player who gets the puck down low then kind of circles out and gets a good chance in front of the net, was it really that guy's fault because he was too close to the shooter? Or maybe it was some other guy's fault that he had to go cover that shooter because someone else had allowed too clean a pass and that shooter was going to get a great shot. It's really complicated and it's hard to do. But here's one of the things I did notice from it's Chris Russell's shot blocking totals. So
Hmm.
he's really noted for the shot block. He's blocked
Yep.
more shots than any other defenseman in the NHL since he came to the Oilers, and he's also
Yep.
got the highest rate of shot blocks at all strengths of any
Right.
defenseman. So when the Oilers had a crappy penalty kill in 2018-19, Russell blocked a lot of shots that year. He blocked for every 60 minutes of PK time, he blocked 14.
Wow.
This year, he blocked 8 for
Hmm.
every 60 minutes. That's a really massive drop. So you might think, well, the Oilers they're putting less emphasis on shot blocking, but that's not the case, because the other defensemen, Nurse, Larson, and Klefbom, their shot blocking numbers all went up year to year. So as Russell was going down, they are going up. So it's really hard to know what to make of that, other than maybe this, that they're asking for a more balanced approach from all of the defensemen,
Yeah.
and what Russell was doing, and I think this is real. I think we saw this, is that he was going less for that to stop all the shots, which is what was maybe the plan was before. Like, we don't want shots from anywhere, block them all. To, man, you cannot allow that diagonal pass. You can't allow that cross-seam pass. That's your number one focus, Chris Russell. And because he is such a responsible defensive player, I think he'd take that kind of message to heart. So again, I'm just speculating about all this. I don't know if any of this is true, but that's what I think might have been happening with Russell, where he had less of an emphasis on blocking the shot, more of an emphasis on blocking the passing lanes. Whereas the other defensemen, maybe they needed to be a bit more aggressive in shot blocking, because shot blocking is really important on the PK,
Mhm.
and maybe they needed to amp it up in terms of getting in front of pucks. I'm just guessing there.
Right.
Any thoughts yourself, Bruce, on that?
Well, Russell, I mean, his overall shot blocking average went down fairly significantly this year.
Yeah.
A little bit surprising that such a substantial. I mean, I'm sure if we broke down all the numbers, we'd find even strength went down a little and the PK went down a lot. I wonder how much of it is a sample size issue. That said, I mean, the guy's pretty consistently blocked 8, 9 shots per 60 minutes throughout his time in Edmonton. This year it was down about 6.5, so significantly less, and his ice time went down. Uh, on the penalty kill, though, his ice time didn't go down. In fact, he was what I considered the first unit playing with Klefbom,
Yeah.
and he actually flipped and played his old right side position on the penalty kill. And the even strength, they tried as much as possible to put him on the left side. While on the penalty kill, dumping the puck out to center is a successful play. So having him on, you know, they wanted to have their best defenders out there, and that included three lefties. Well, he was the guy for that scenario to play on his wrong side. Uh, but it did seem to be somewhat a change of style. Like I was noticing throughout the season, I thought, Russell, like Klefbom's shot blocking totals was just ramping up, and he was just leaving Russell in the dirt. And every other year, Russell would just pull away from the other Oilers and basically pull away from the rest of the league. It was just such a central part of his game that whether it was something that he did, was coached to do, whether the new defensive coach, whether the head coach, whether the special teams coaching or whatever, or just and like I say, the sample size is small enough that maybe two or three block shots credited in there would make a difference in that rate. But uh, I did. To me, it looked like his he kept his feet more. I saw fewer starfish out of him this year. The diving, heroic defensive sliding play once in a while, but not as common a mechanism as he's done in the past. So,
Well, I'm
it's
going to suggest this was a more disciplined PK.
hmm
And one of the things they scored 10 PK goals, Bruce, the year before. Um,
hmm
this year they
shorties.
scored shorties,
hmm
10 shorties, 2018-19 when they had such a terrible PK. This year they scored three. And I'm going to say that one of the things was it's like, guys, just forget about the whole scoring goals thing on the PK. We need you forwards to focus on one thing, and that's stopping these diagonal passes down low across the ice. Allow them to go to the outside and take a shot. Leave that lane open. Do not allow them to make that diagonal cross seam pass through you. And maybe don't be quite so aggressive. I mean, the way you get shorthanded goals on the PK is by crowding that defenseman and stripping the puck off him, right? And going. That's one of the main ways. And maybe the message was forget about that. That's not what we want you to do when you're out there. We want you to cross to stop that cross seam pass down low. Because this is the one thing I think we can say with certainty is there was far fewer of those kinds of plays. The cross seam pass, and it was often a double whammy. When they were so bad, it would be like from the defenseman to the one side, and then from the one side to the other, and then goal for the
Yeah,
power play goal. And we saw that play maybe whereas we probably saw that play 10 or 15 or 20 times the
once
year
a week.
before.
Once a week.
Yeah, we saw it 3, 4, 5 times this year, hardly ever. And so that's how you cut down on high danger chances from the slot, is by taking away that pass. And that was a huge focus. I saw them good sticks and good positioning for them more this year. So good for the Oilers.
Yeah, special teams was absolutely mammoth, and both special teams got
What
the
do you?
job done. I also one last with just I think the goalies, um, their save percentage was way better on the penalty kill. I think sometimes in the past that the penalty kill would be all right, and then the goalie let in a bad goal. It just
Yeah,
drive you nuts. I don't think there was too many. If we look at grade B power play goals against, I bet you that went down. I
it went
bet.
down significantly from I think it was like 17-3.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
So I'm just that
Used to
might not be,
drive,
might
used
be
to
more like
drive,
13-3.
used to
Uh,
drive me nuts. The goalie had let in a shot from the sidewall or something. And I mean, there's no blaming the players. It's just a bad goal, right?
Now, Bruce, like about 10 years ago, what we would have heard if I had said these numbers about shot volume and shot quality, we would have heard from the kind of the shot volume camp, like, well,
hmm
this is unsustainable. This is all puck luck.
hmm
And I, so here's what I'll tell you what I think about that. I think that maybe on the PK, a lot of it isn't sustainable. Maybe there was some puck luck on the PK here. I'm not going to rule that out. I think that might be one of the factors, especially on the PK. On the power play, like, well, are they going to be as shooting? What did they shoot? Like 20% this year? Are they going to keep shooting at that forever? Let's see.
Yeah.
Uh, they're not going to get maybe not quite that good, but Bruce, we saw in the 1980s a group of superstar players come together and absolutely crush it on the power play year in year out, year in year out. Well, we have Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Oscar Klefbom. They're going to be joined by Kailer Yamamoto, Evan Bouchard, Ethan Bear. Bruce, I think this is the success, the idea that the Oilers could be in the top 2 or 3 on the power play for the next 5 years. That sounds like a sustainable notion to me. So I think, yeah, however many shots they generate, I think they're going to be able to continue to generate high danger shots on an ongoing basis going forward, and that's going to lead to a lot of goals. Now they might get bad puck luck and at some point and stop scoring a bit, but man, this is not for long. This
It's
unit,
just too much. There's just too much there, unless they lose players to injury or whatever. But there's too many weapons, and the opposition's, and of course, in the same boat. They can't really go man to man against 4-on-5. So they got to leave. They got to be vulnerable somewhere. And this, now that the power play's unlocked McDavid to move a little more freely around the zone, and Draisaitl too, to a lesser extent, it just creates a myriad of problems for the defensive team and goalie.
what do you think about the PK and puck luck? What's your take on that?
I think, yeah, both goalies being over 900. I'm not sure I'm counting on that happening again next year. So I would expect them to regress some, but ideally you want to be in the top 10 in both. Ideally you want to be in the top 10 of as many major categories as you possibly can be. And if you're in the top 10 of a lot of categories, you don't have to totally rely on a few to be otherworldly. It'd be nice to be in the top 10 or even the top half of the league at even strength. That would really solve some problems. But on the special teams, I think the power play is, as you say, definitely got the potential to be top 5 for quite a while, and maybe top 3 or better. But there's a lot of history of teams that have a great power play, of just keeping it year over year. That the power play. I mean, Washington, how long have they had a
Well, that's yeah.
top-notch power play? And when you have even though you know what the weapon is, and you know what it is that they're trying to do, good luck stopping it, right? If they execute, they got the extra man, they got the puck, and they got it in your zone. Uh, you know, here's your mission.
To quote the Cowboy Junkies, you can always see it coming, but you can never stop it. Let's talk, Bruce, about the NHL's idea, trial balloon, as Gary Bettman eventually called it, I believe, of having the draft in June. And you pointed out the obvious flaws in it. And man, when I read your piece, it's like that. How could you? Maybe they wanted to try to create some excitement in June about the league, because there's lots of excitement right now about the NFL draft. Like people are so happy, there's just all this happy talk about it. Maybe they wanted to have that going on, but there's just, why can't they do it?
Well, the one reason why they could do it, and why it's not a bad idea to be planning for it, is in the eventuality that they don't pick up hockey. And then that if the 1920 season gets abandoned, then the 2021 season, the rhythm of the 2021 season starts with the draft. And if there's a decision reached, say mid-June, that nope, this isn't going to work. It's like, the Folk Fest and the Fringe and the Stampede all have already been abandoned well in advance. Well, that I think their original thinking may have been, let's have a two-pronged thing. We have this set of plans if we don't resume, and this set if we do resume. And there was no way they were ever going to do the draft in the middle of the season. So I thought maybe this draft, they're setting up for June just in the eventuality that they come to the conclusion, sometime in June, that nope, this is just not a workable thing to ever finish this season. So let's get going on the next year. But it sounds more and more like they're heavily leaning towards picking up and ending the 2019-20 season in some fashion. And if they do, the draft has to be, in my opinion, after that season is over, because there's just too many variables at play that they don't know, of course, the order that teams are going to finish in. So the draft order is completely dependent on that, and it's also dependent on playoff results. Uh, they don't know. There's so many conditional draft picks out there. There are 6 first-round picks that are potentially going to get traded this year based on what happens in the remainder of the regular season and the playoffs. Well, how do you have a draft if the remainder of the regular season and the playoffs are still going to be held at some point in the future? Then you have the matter of the draft often featuring trades of draft picks for players. And oftentimes those trades are kind of the reverse of what you see at the trade deadline. You see, say, a team like Ottawa Senators that's collected a ton of draft choices and thinking, well, we can speed up our rebuild by trading draft picks for players from better teams that are looking to move on from players. Uh, for instance, last year, J.T. Miller from Tampa Bay to Vancouver for a draft pick. Well, who's going to make that trade? Do you think Tampa would have made that trade at the trade deadline last year? Well, no, of course not. They wanted J.T. Miller for the playoffs. They waited till the draft and they traded him then, and they got a pick for him. Well, if the playoffs are after the draft, none of the teams that are in contention are going to be looking to move away from players and doing a rebuilding like that. It's the whole point of trading at the draft is it is the off season, and if you stick the draft in the middle of the season, all of that, the whole rationale of the thing changes drastically. It'd be like having a second trade deadline as opposed to having an off-season, trading pot that they typically have at the draft. So a lot of headaches. And like I say, the only thing in favor of a June draft is only if they know that they're already looking ahead to 2021 and that this season has been abandoned. So that's why I thought maybe, they're not ruling anything out, but if this happens, this won't happen. But until we know, we'll just proceed ahead with both plans. But already Alan Walsh, Darren Drager says doubtful NHL will hold a draft in June, and Alan Walsh, the player agent, says looks like a June draft June NHL draft is now off the table. Trial balloon popped. Most GMs against it, and it was widely considered a bad idea, presumably for the reasons just mentioned.
Yeah. That JT Miller trade really worked out for Vancouver in the short
It did.
term, at least.
It did. It was a good trade.
I can't speak. I don't even know what they gave up. Was it a first? Was it a first?
It was a conditional first. Condition being if they make the playoffs. Right now, Vancouver is sitting in a playoff position if you go by points possession percentage, but not if you go by points. I think I got it right. Anyway, they're right on the cusps. So if they were to hold a draft in June, would the condition be in effect or not? Not in effect. There's a whole lot of those. Schrodinger's draft picks. that
72 points in 69 games. Good for him.
Yeah, no, he's been excellent. And Tampa, they had to move cap, and so they stockpiled a draft choice, and then they traded the pick. The pick actually went to New Jersey in the Blake Coleman trade, potentially. So they didn't keep the pick, but what they did was they moved on from J.T. Miller, and they got Blake Coleman, who was a lot cheaper player. Because it fit their salary structure better. Like there's a lot of moving pieces in play, and the natural rhythm of the game is the things go in a sequence for a logical reason. And if you were to disrupt that sequence by having the draft at the regular time, but the playoffs at an irregular time, then you're creating all kinds of headaches.
Yeah, it was
migraine headaches.
Yeah. It quickly became apparent just probably talking about that. So, alrighty. Well, I think what's your next post, Bruce? What are you working on?
I'm going to do a part 3 on Dave Tippett. I've taken the time, which obviously we have in abundance, to do a deeper dive than usual on the GM and coaching this year. I did a 5-part, 10,000 word magnum opus on Ken Holland. I won't be doing as much depth on Tippett because I'm more an armchair GM than an armchair coach, to be frank. And I'm interested in deployment of players and some of the things that can be measured, and we'll look at that a little bit more. And the last post I wrote on him was specific to the one major move he made at exactly mid-season when he put Leon Draisaitl in the middle, split up McDavid and Draisaitl, and changed his axis of power. I think I expressed this before, from horizontal to vertical, and made himself, a two-line team at least, and flipping Draisaitl and McDavid, or Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins, and throwing the rookie on the right wing. Like, there was a lot going on in that one move, and it paid off in spades. So I did an in-depth look at that. I'll do a much shallower look at just the general deployment of players, and uh, how he used and how he got value out of his younger players, and how he made the pieces fit, at least to the degree that they did. I mean, we look at this as being a successful team. They won 37 out of 71 games, which is great for an Oilers team, but it's, in the middle, just above middle of the pack. So not everything worked, but I'm viewing, as with Ken Holland, as I look deeper into Dave Tippett, I'm coming away thinking, yeah, this is a guy who knows what he's doing, and he's getting results based on, him. He's an experienced guy. Uh, he got a few tricks up his sleeve, and he's passed his first test, and that's for sure.
I'm going to keep digging into the penalty kill.
Hmm.
My next post will be on the mistakes that we did count up. I
Right.
and trying to see if there's anything we can glean out of that. And I think again there's going to be something. And I'll probably, or we'll probably look at Gaetan Haas. Maybe I'll do it or you'll
Hmm.
do it going forward. All right, Bruce. Thanks for talking today.
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.